All right, listeners, welcome to season 2 podcast of Life is Better with You in It. And this season is all about transitions and this word with that won't leave me alone. And so I've got someone who's been through a couple of transitions herself. She's one of the first people I thought of when I thought about having this podcast season. So I want to introduce you to my friend TIffany. And TIffany is an author. She is a bigwig at a job. She's got all of the things going on for volunteering. She's done international travel. So, TIffany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You got it. And so, listeners, I've brought TIffany on because I want her to talk to you about her book. And her book is a little bit about transition. I think that we, as a collective human nature, we go through these transitions in life, whether they're good, bad, or ugly, right? We all experience some sort of transition, some sort of season where we make a change for our lives, or something happens to us, and then we have to kind of react to it. And so, TIffany is someone who's been through a couple of transitions. So, TIffany, tell us a little bit about you, right? You're a mom, you have, a job where you get to travel a bunch. It says on your book that international travel saved your life. And so you sit on a board for a nonprofit. Like, tell us about a couple of the things that you do besides being a mom. What does life look like for you?
Yeah, aside from being a mom, which is the most important role that I have, right? I have three amazing kids. Definitely, my job is such a huge blessing. I love it. I do software testing and installation as
Right.
a contractor. For the aid now, it's been such a wonderful ride. I've been on the board now for almost 6 years in helping the homeless community locally, and those facing food insecurity. Did get into some volunteer work with a nonprofit called All Hands and Hearts, where we did disaster response and relief. So that took me across the world in several ways, which is mentioned in the book. And then I also do volunteering at church, playing keys in the band and with children's ministry and just all sorts of things. Definitely busy. I keep myself busy, that's for
I
sure.
can tell. And so on top of all of those things, you mentioned and hinted at the fact that you wrote a book.
Yep.
And so listeners, she wrote a book and it's called A Beauty Beyond the Threshold, and it talks about how international travel saved your life. So tell us about this book and maybe, you know, what kind of transition you went through in this book that you wanted to share with everybody.
Sure. So I had never ever envisioned I was going to be an author. That wasn't something that was on my bucket list of things to do. But I had a really interesting thing happen where I was in a season of my life where I was very severely depressed.
Mm.
And I found what brought me out of that was pushing myself out of my comfort zone and trying new things. So that's where I got the title Beauty Beyond the Threshold, because there's good things that come beyond those comfort zone lines.
Mhm.
And how I pushed myself in those boundaries was traveling and volunteering in disaster response projects. So through that, I would tell people my story of my transformation, how these trips were really good for me, how I tried new things, my confidence was boosted. I had gained some self-respect and self-love, and they're like, you need to tell people about this. This is
Mhm.
important. So that's why I decided to share my story.
That's awesome. So when I think about writing a book, right? So I'm also writing a book. I'm writing a book about like this word with. I'm writing a book about being something else because I've been called that a couple times in my life. And I'm like, well, that's mine now. And I'm just going to use it in a positive way. And so when I think about the person in the chair, Bob Goff tells me to focus on the person in the chair. So when you wrote this book, who was your person in the chair? Who was the person that you were writing to when you kind of came out of this like season of transition and transformation?
I specifically wrote the book to those who are hurting, who are sad, who are depressed, who feel like they have no direction, who feel like
Mm.
they are just at a loss of where to go in life. And so I wanted to write the book for them to show that there is hope. And sometimes you're just going to have to push yourself a little bit to get it. If you're sitting stagnant, that change doesn't come. And sometimes it's through uncomfortable things. But I found when you push yourself to do something new, then your confidence just grows. And my hope and prayer was to help other people find that confidence.
Gotcha. So you did international travel and you're writing to someone who is depressed, hurting, going through something probably big and like trying to tell them like go do something uncomfortable, right? Like go do something that's going to make you very uncomfortable because you're going to learn something from it. And so out of all the things that you could have picked, you picked international travel. What made you pick it? Like, were you up late at night watching QVC and then they were like, let's do some international travel to volunteer? Like, what made you think about that? Like, having to get a passport, shots, I'm sure, all of the things to do that.
Yeah, so I the concept of traveling by myself was never something again that I had ever envisioned I would do.
Yeah,
But it was kind
it's
of one of
nerve-wracking.
those like, yeah, it was one of those kind of aha epiphany moments. I was taking a walk around a lake that had like a path, and there was a big branch that had fallen across the path. And for some reason, the first thing that popped in my mind, because everyone else normally would be like, oh, a branch, let me step over.
Yeah.
What popped into my mind was, oh my goodness, I wonder if I should go help in Puerto Rico. Now, let me rewind here.
Okay.
So
I'm
the
like, wait,
hurricane,
what? What?
yes, so Hurricane Maria a few months prior had hit Puerto Rico, what caused total devastation. And I have family that lives in Puerto Rico. My grandmother was born and raised, and I knew that they had struggled down there. And so, for some reason, seeing this branch just brought me to Puerto Rico and the devastation that was caused there. So I immediately rushed back to my desk and Googled, like, is there any volunteer work in Puerto Rico? Now, I'm telling you, this was not something that was from me. This was like something that was like, God telling me you need to go do this.
Wow.
And I found this organization called All Hands and Hearts, and they had volunteer opportunities. And I booked and I signed up for like within 2 weeks. I already had my passport, thankfully, but I knew that if I put it off, I wouldn't go because I'd be too scared because the job descriptions were like roof repair
Yeah.
and mold removal. And I'm like, I don't know how to do any of these things. But for some
Mhm.
reason, I felt so called to go do it. And I just signed up for it and I was scared out of my mind.
What did you learn from the experience of like getting completely out of the country to get you out of your comfort zone and get you out of this like depression? I don't know if like, depression is a thing that you get cured from. I don't know enough about it to speak about it. But like, what did you learn from that experience?
I think it took me completely out of my element. In my day-to-day life, I was just kind of going through the motions,
Mm,
going to work, going to my job and going to, the kids' activities, things like that. So it really had to take something that took me out of comfort into something new environment and learning new things was cool. Meeting new people, it was interesting. But the most I got out of it was experiencing the gratitude from the people we were helping. In particular, we helped fix the roof for this man named Israel, and he was just in tears, so
mm,
grateful. Was telling us the stories about how after the hurricane hit, they didn't have power for 7 months. They had to walk down to the town and get ice every single morning and stand in line just so they could keep some of their food cold. And I thought to myself, maybe my problems aren't as big as they seemed. It made me take a step back to think I've been taking so much of my life for granted, and I need to really keep in mind of the things that I'm like trying to trick myself into thinking about how bad my life is going. And
mm.
it really put things into perspective for me to go home and then try to just live a life of having more gratitude. And then also taking the skills that I had learned and that new confidence, like I can do concrete roof repair because I was successful and I did it. And that's really
Right.
cool. Yeah. Not a lot of
That's
people can
awesome.
say that.
No, I cannot say that. I typically call
Yeah.
somebody. So you've learned, to get some perspective. You took yourself out of your element to kind of take on like this mission trip, get yourself out of the day to day. And then, you decided to write it all out on paper for other people and to help other people. So if someone were sitting in an elevator with you, right, and you knew that this person was a person in the chair, right, you had talked to this person for a few minutes and you know that this was someone that was in that chair that you were writing to and they were going through a hard season, I'm wondering, right? Like when I think about us being with other people, sometimes I think it's as easy as like having a conversation or you're feeling led to say something to somebody. And like that's how we can start to genuinely be with people. So when I think about people who want to help others, if you were in an elevator with someone who was in that chair, what would you tell them? You had 2 minutes to talk to them about your experience and like how to help them help themselves and get help. What would you tell them?
I would say that there is no greater joy the than the feeling of helping other people. And especially when you're feeling sad yourself, it is hard sometimes to get out there and put yourself out there and do something. But the beauty of volunteering is that there are organizations for literally so many different things. If you're an animal lover, there you can volunteer with an organization that deals with animals, or if you want to help feed the homeless. I mean, there's so many options, so many
Yep.
options. And in that process of helping other people, you learn about yourself. And so I encourage that, getting putting yourself out there, and sometimes it's intimidating to try something new or take on a different role that you're not used to in a volunteer sense. It really is life changing, and I highly recommend it.
That's awesome. So, for our listeners out there, obviously it's important for us to be with other people and to take those next steps to make yourself uncomfortable, right? If you're hurting, if you've got something going on, volunteering is a great and effective way to kind of like instantly help you put your mind into perspective and kind of give yourself some gratitude about what you're experiencing, and that when you go home you can figure it out, right? If you can figure out how to fix a roof, I'm sure there's always a way, and there's always another option to figure out the things that you've got on in life. So tell me a little bit about maybe who you're currently volunteering with now and maybe how others could get involved.
Sure. So, do a lot of active volunteering with Aid Now. Being on the board, we have constant activities going on with that keep me busy. I also volunteer at my church, as I mentioned earlier, doing worship and with children's ministry. And so, for right now, those are the things that keep me really busy.
Yeah.
Also, have done little tiny volunteer things here and there. Back in December, I volunteered with Wreaths Across America. So there are opportunities to do something that's just a 1 day thing. If you want to just try it, you don't have to commit. I think that's sometimes the hard part, is that people
Mhm.
think if they sign up to volunteer, they're committing to something long term. And there are options where you can just sign up and try, just give it a try. I encourage you to look at, figure out what you're interested in. You want to volunteer in something that you're interested in, and just do a quick Google search and see what's available in your area. Um, and then reach out to those organizations and take the steps from there.
Awesome. So we can get involved. We'll post the links after this podcast about Aid Now, how to get involved. And I think that there's like a website too. It's like volunteermatch or something.org where you can like kind of like put in your specifics. And so those of you listeners and those who are supporting people kind of in these types of scenarios, maybe like navigating depression, navigating a terrible season, get off the couch, get out there, go try something new. TIffany, do you think that there's like a secret sauce for the way in which you are with other people, right? Because I've kind of watched you for a while, not in a creepy way, but like you have a way of like being with other people and with other people volunteering and encouraging other people. So is there any secret sauce to it, or is it just as simple as committing and signing up? Like what is that for you?
For me personally, it's been taking the steps in the beginning. It's really hard because I get very uncomfortable and nervous, and my face tells that, so everybody can see that I'm uncomfortable and nervous. um it does take for it does take time, and once you get comfortable and gain that confidence, then there's a beautiful transformation that happens. So you get past the nervousness, and it's like a phase, right? So you're very, very nervous, and you're
Mhm.
kind of okay, but this is good. And then you're nervous and it's good. And then it just gets more to like, this is good. And you're no longer nervous anymore because you've crossed that threshold, you've crossed that boundary, and you're really seeing the good that's coming out of these experiences. I'm also found what has helped me be more with people in these things as I try new things, is I've noticed that as I go through life, and there are times where I have hit hard situations, I've hit sad situations, I've hit some heartbreak, I've had troubles and turmoils and all of the above. But through serving and volunteering, my mindset is more focused on the positive, is more focused on
Mm,
the good versus the negative. And so I then kind of wrap myself around those experiences in volunteering because I know it's going to help keep my mind focused in the right direction and focused on what good is happening in my situation versus the sad. And that in itself is like it's transformational for your mind. So it's like being engaged with the people is what helps keep me not depressed. And it's a beautiful cycle. And they don't even know it really. I mean, they're just there doing their thing, but they're
yeah.
helping me in ways that they don't even realize.
I think that for some of our listeners and like even me included, I'm like, did the volunteering solve your problems? It doesn't sound like it did,
No,
but
no.
it gives you that different perspective to be able to handle it in a much probably better, more effective way than what you would have if you didn't have that perspective. So, listeners, I encourage you to get out there, be volunteering, because when you're going through a transition, specifically when you're going through something that's rough, I think that there's so much value in a couple of things. Okay. So I'll leave you with these, listeners. It sounds like Tiffany's telling us that there's value in being around people because we're never going to escape people, and there's so much value in with. So being with people, whether it's volunteering, whether it's, being with others at a park, whatever, get out there and go find some people. There's also value in finding that perspective. So being able to focus your mind on what is positive, what is good, what's going good, and then continuing to have that positive stuff going on, right? Like, I'm going to continue to volunteer. This is my one good thing, and this is going to help my perspective. And then the last thing I think is about getting involved, finding some way to just try and be uncomfortable, like get comfortable being
Mhm.
uncomfortable. Because I think if we can try all those three things, I think it can help us as we walk through whatever transition, right? We have no idea who's going to listen to this podcast. We have no idea who's maybe going through something right now. Because even sometimes when you say, "How are you?" people are like, "I'm fine," but
Yeah.
you not. And I know you're not. So let's talk about it. So let's keep focused on those three things, listeners, as you be with other people, as you walk through transition, that your mindset is a beautiful thing. So focus on the good. Get uncomfortable. Go do something that's going to make you feel uncomfortable because you're going to learn something from it. And then get with people, because there's no way around getting with people and being in community with people. So, Tiffany, thank you for your time today. I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast. And we are going to put your book on the Amazon link. We'll put it in the comments. And then we'll put in a link to about getting involved with Aid Now, and then some volunteering for anyone who's outside of the Virginia area.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
You're welcome. All right, listeners, life is better with you in it. And thank you for listening today. Have a great week.